All right, click the links to join the channel. Check out the various other video platforms. So Rings of Power Season 2 in 2024 or maybe 2025, which seems like an excessive delay. And so this quote says a lot in one sentence. He goes, there may be viewers who are like, this is the story we're hoping to get in Season 1. In Season 2, we're giving it to them. Why didn't you just give them the story they were hoping in Season 1? And then you would have started off strong. Plot twist, they're not going to give you the story in Season 2. They're lying to you. There is no saving Rings of Power. They say they're going to return to canon, which is kind of an admission that 38% on Rotten Tomato is not doing. They're aware of it. Though oddly enough, Internet Movie Database has a 69%, so I think that might have something to do with the fact they own that website. So they're lying to you. They have no intention of returning to canon because they can't and they don't want to, even if someone was pulling the strings in a different direction. They use media to push globalist propaganda. Tolkien's story was a nationalist blood tribal story of Aristotle's phyla. It's nationalism versus globalism, which is what so much of this stuff, and I know I say that all the time, but it really is an easy lens to look through to kind of judge this stuff, because you see these two different templates being writ large so often. Tolkien's story makes sense because it's people fighting for something that matters, their own people. Amazon is not going to tell that story. That's not why they're in business. They're globalists. Rings of Power is not there to tell Tolkien's story. They're not sex swapping and race swapping to tell Tolkien's story. Amazon is telling Amazon's story. Rings of Power is just a hollowed out shell. It's like a parasite zombie controlled corpse, which most people are aware of. That's why it got that 38%. But people are watching, and I think they're either watching to see if it'll improve or cringe watching. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's Amazon globalist propaganda. They don't make something as bad as Season 1 with any intent of returning to canon. And I got to say that comparing the show to The Sopranos or the Walter White show, two shows I have not seen, and then comparing it to Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, I don't think those are good signs to comparing this pop culture disaster to other pop culture examples, even though they might have been good or not. So Rings of Power Part 2 might not even be out until 2025, which is actually probably good for them because it gives people a chance to forget how bad the first season was. But Season 2 is going to be just as bad. It's not just that they would have to fire all the writers, because the creative direction of the story is obviously from the top down. People will mostly do what you tell them to do. The waters in which they swim are propaganda. The whole structure of the show is based on the globalist philosophy. Probably why they're relating it to recent other, propaganda type of just real fluff shows, as opposed to something much older and much truer, which doesn't make sense because Tolkien's story was tribal. The hobbits fought for each other because they are blood family, as were the men, the elves, the dwarves within their own groups. They teamed up, but they were still their own individual tribes. Rings of Power subverts and corrupts all of that. They have a tribe of elves that have non-elves in their tribe. That doesn't make any sense, because people in a tribe have roughly similar features. If you have Afro hobbits and Euro hobbits, it might be politically correct, but in representation and diversity, yeah, but I don't value any of those things in a story because it comes across to me as propaganda. I want to see what the artist's original intention was. Well, you're not going to see that with, obviously you're not going to see that with Amazon. So, but combining those two things into the story destroys the willing suspension of disbelief. You remove Europeans from European mythology that an Englishman wrote. It's obviously disrespectful to them, but it's also disrespectful to the non-Europeans because you're not telling an organic European story, and you don't find any value in an African story because you refuse to tell their story. Like, obviously, we know you hate European people and you don't value their stories. you don't hold their mythology sacred, but you don't hold the African mythology sacred either because you're not telling their story. Instead, you combine this propaganda amalgam to tell nobody's story. Africans are not Europeans. You can't combine them in a story where it doesn't make any sense. It's not an organic story. It's propaganda. Or I should say, you can't combine them in this story. You can combine them in a separate story where they come together for a purpose, but you have them all together as one tribe. That doesn't make any sense. Verisimilitude and the willing suspension of disbelief, you got to play within the rules. Otherwise, people look at this and goes, oh, it feels like you're just following a Hollywood woke checklist, because that's precisely what you're doing. The only way to fix the story would be to get rid of the characters that don't belong, the non-Europeans, because they are not in Tolkien's story. Since that wouldn't happen, an alternative would be to start the season over, to tell the story as intended, as a story of European mythology. Recast it with English actors and just start fresh. You have to just admit that you were in the wrong on this. That 38% from the audience is letting you know what's going on. Let me be clear. If you told this story as it was intended with European actors, the show would be way more successful. They would make more money for the very simple logic that people would watch it because it would feel organic. There's no telling a European story with non-European actors. We read the books. We saw the movies. We know that this is not Lord of the Rings. This is some Hollywood piece of propaganda. Why is there an African queen leading a mixed group of people on the island? That's not a nation. That's just an economic zone. You may as well include a Soros Schwab characters. Nobody cares about a mixed group because their motivation doesn't make sense. What exactly are they fighting for? Central banking and higher taxes and fractional reserve lending or something? Hey, let's print some more money. What the hell is money? We have gold. Not anymore, you don't. So at the first sign of trouble, the society would break down along tribal lines. The Euro and Afro are not of the same tribe, so why are they in the story? Different groups have different interests. I mean, again, like the story has to look like it makes sense and not just fit a Hollywood diverse purse puppy checklist. Recent events have very much changed the way that people see social structures. We have seen clearly that globalism is a failure. Nobody wants to see a fantasy world of a globalist Shangri-La. We turn on the news and we know it's abject failure. Recent events have made people very tribal, focused on in-group preferences. People want a return to tribal community, i.e. blood community. And the thing is, unfortunately for Amazon, we have the earlier movies from 20 years ago to hold up as comparisons to this current propaganda. The earlier films made sense. For some reason, the truth is not politically correct, but it still remains the truth and must be spoken no matter what. Rings of Power shows us this world viewed through rose-colored globalist glasses. Like that would be the opposite of They Live glasses. It's not just it's not just really it's not just like believable to us. Because obviously it's a fantasy, but I mean, like Lord of the Rings is a believable fantasy world. It's based on a small European village experience where people are the people. They evolved together under similar environmental stressors. They belong together. They have a history and a culture and a language, and they have that history of going through good times and bad times and coming out the other side together. It all makes sense. In Rings of Power, you have Afro-hobbits and Euro-hobbits who don't belong together in an organic tribe for the obvious reasons that they are different. And I don't mean subjectively as some kind of cultural commentary that they don't belong together. I mean objectively, they don't belong together. Why are they together in a tribe if they have different physical features? Clearly, they evolved in vastly different physical environments. When we see them on screen together, we know we're seeing a Hollywood diversity checklist that is willing to destroy the story to advance their globalist agenda, because you simply ask, oh, why are they there? And they say something about, oh, representation and diversity. And if you don't like it, you're istophobic. Well, ad hominem aside, that doesn't address why they're there in the story. This isn't Tolkien's story. Oh, well, he didn't say that they weren't there. But we read the books. There's the 5 books that go into this: The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, the 6 books that make up a 3-part trilogy, and then the Silmarillion. But the Harfoots are browner of skin. Yeah, like Mediterranean Europeans, which the story was based on. That would be the Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece. That's browner of skin. They're still based on the European mythology. That's the browner of skin part. He said browner of skin. Yes, Europeans have a massive the spectrum of like Irish in wintertime is going to be as fair as you can get, and then Spain or Italy or something during the summertime is going to be the other end of the spectrum of tan. That's what browner of skin means. The hobbits they're of the same phyla, they're of the same tribe. They're still the Hobbit family. They're there's the mountain hobbits, the river hobbits, the whatever hobbits. It's like, yes, the ones that are outdoors more are going to be slightly browner of skin. That's what that means. It doesn't mean this is just absurd. And people hear that and they're so triggered by political correctness. I'm talking about the story. I'm talking about this organic universe. This doesn't make sense. If you want to tell this kind of, the Elf Quest kind of story of, just globalist propaganda, you have to start fresh. Write something fresh. Oh, but nobody will watch it because then we can't bait and switch. Yeah, but let's just admit that that's what you're doing. Like answering the question that you're istophobic or it's representation of diversity, those are just globalist talking points. Those don't relate to me because I'm looking almost in an autistic sense at the story structure itself and the writer and when it was created and the author's experience and the stories themselves. They're not in the story, so why are you putting them there? And you answer diversity and representation, but those aren't values to me to tell this story. To tell this story, you should abide as clearly by the author's original vision as you possibly can, and you're not doing that. You're doing something else, and that something else is called propaganda. That's the definition of propaganda. You're inserting your own globalist worldview into what was one of the best series of stories ever written to make propaganda. We don't want to see propaganda. And this isn't a universe where you can do this because now we have social media and all social media. We can talk about this and say this. Yeah, this just isn't acceptable to erase European people, specifically English people, from the stories that the mythology and the stories that they themselves created. That's like one of the stages of genocide, to erase people from their own mythology. It's deeply disturbing that you would feel comfortable like defending this. And it's like it's an insult if you're one of these, like the actors is just a paycheck, but to get online and defend it, like you don't have a defense to do this, and it makes you look like an idiot because they're saying, like, one, Hollywood doesn't want to tell our stories, and two, we're content to be second fiddle. Like our stories are so valueless that we have to jump in on a European story and tell it instead of telling one of our own stories. And in these stories, like there's specifically Africans in the stories swapped out for Europeans, as opposed to Chinese or East Asians, Chinese, Japanese, South Koreans, something like that. It's like Hollywood always does this specifically with Africans, and I wonder why they do that and why no one else raises their hand and go, wait, what about Mexicans? How come Mexicans aren't in the story? It's only Africans where you guys do this kind of race swapping, especially like Disney and modern stories where they've got old IPs. They'll swap out, the fair, light-eyed characters specifically for African, like blonde or redhead characters. They'll specifically swap them out for African, but not like Chinese or something else. You go, but that doesn't make any sense that you're repeatedly doing this. Do you think we don't notice? Do you think we're not paying attention? Because noticing is intensifying, like all over the place. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Subscribestar, Odyssey, Bit Chute, Telegram, Locals, and whatever else comes up. And I'll see you guys next episode.